Good afternoon, everybody, and apologies for interrupting your Sunday afternoon, but I wanted to say a few words about the truly historic achievement that was secured in Glasgow last night. And I'm very, very pleased to be joined by Alok Sharma, my friend, the president of the COP. For 2 weeks at COP26, politicians and negotiators and campaigners from around the world have been locked in talks about how we're going to keep our planet habitable for future generations by getting real about climate change. It was the biggest political gathering of any kind ever held in this country. And there was a reason for that. All these world leaders came to Glasgow because their politicians are telling them that they need to act. And we've heard about the peril that we face if we fail. We've heard from the individuals who are already living with the effects. And yesterday evening, we finally came to the kind of game-changing agreement that the world needed to see. Almost 200 countries have put their name to the Glasgow Climate Pact, marking a decisive shift in the world's approach to tackling climate emissions, setting a clear roadmap to limiting the rise in global temperatures to 1.5 degrees, and marking the beginning of the end for coal power. Because for the first time ever, a UN climate change conference has delivered a mandate to cut the use of coal power generation. And it's backed up by real action from individual countries. For example, we've arranged a multi-billion-pound partnership to help South Africa ditch coal and create new green jobs instead. On top of that, we've brokered a deal with the G20 to end international finance for coal by the end of next month. We've persuaded most of Western Europe and North America to mirror the commitment I made last December by pulling the plug on financial support for all overseas fossil fuel projects by this time next year. And when you add all that together, it is beyond question that Glasgow has sounded the death knell for coal power. It's a fantastic achievement, and it's just one of many to emerge from COP26. 90% of the world's economy is now following our lead here in the UK by committing to net zero, ending their contribution to climate change altogether. Don't forget that when Alok took the reins of COP, it wasn't even a third who were committed to net zero. The developed world is finally going to hit the $100 billion climate finance target, if only a bit later than we would have liked. And over 130 countries have signed up to halt and reverse deforestation by 2030. And between them, those countries are home to more than 90% of the world's forests. We've got trillions of pounds of private sector assets lined up with climate goals. And we've even managed to do something that has eluded the world for 6 years by finalising the Paris rulebook, allowing us to move from interminable debates about how to measure emissions and instead get on with cutting them. Of course, my delight at this progress is tinged with disappointment. Those for whom climate change is already a matter of life and death, who can only stand by as their islands are submerged, their farmland turned to desert, their homes battered by storms, they demanded a high level of ambition for this summit. And while many of us were willing to go there, that wasn't true of everybody. And sadly, that's the nature of diplomacy. We can lobby, we can cajole, we can encourage, but we cannot force sovereign nations to do what they do not wish to do. It's ultimately their decision to make, and they must stand by it. But for all that, we can be immensely proud of what has been achieved by Alok Sharma and his team. I want to take this opportunity to thank him for his many months of tireless diplomacy and thank everyone involved in making COP26 a success, from the bobble-hatted volunteers to Peter Hill and his team in the COP unit. There he is. I know it's tempting to be cynical and to dismiss these types of summits as talking shops. But we came to COP with a call for real action on coal, cars, cash and trees, and real action is exactly what we've got. And just look at what it all means for our planet. Before Paris, the world was on course for a devastating 4 degrees warming by the end of this century. After Paris, remember, we were heading for 3 degrees. At Glasgow, we've turned that dial down to around 2 degrees increase. And of course, that's still far too high. But for all our disagreements, the world is undeniably heading in the right direction. Even the most pessimistic commentator will tell you that 1.5 degrees, that goal of restricting the growth in temperatures to 1.5 degrees, is still alive. Now the work continues to make that ambition a reality. Alok is going to keep pushing, along with everybody else in the UK government, to strengthen the promises made in Glasgow and to make sure that they are delivered and not diluted. The UK government is going to get on with our own extraordinary record of decarbonisation, get on with delivering our green industrial revolution and exporting that revolution worldwide. There's still a long journey ahead of us and very little time to complete it. But COP26 has shown that we can do this. We can end our reliance on coal and fossil fuels. We can put the brakes on runaway climate change. And we can preserve our unique planet for generations to come. I want to finish by thanking once again the people of Glasgow for putting on a spectacular summit, and of course I want to thank Police Scotland as well for everything that they did. And now over to you, to the media for some questions. Damien Chromaticus, BBC News.
Prime Minister, thank you very much. First, for all its achievements after this summit, it's the case, isn't it, that we are still on course for climate change, and climate change at dangerous levels. And what's happened is, yes, there have been successes, but the ball has been passed to the next summits, next COPs. Mr. Sharma, you were nearly in tears at the end of the COP. You just allowed China and India to make final changes that watered things down. That really angered and disappointed the small island states, didn't it? Because it's left them still vulnerable and still threatened. And Prime Minister, just one supplementary. Just over a week ago, you demanded that all Conservative MPs vote to delay any punishment for Owen Paterson while the system for governing MPs was looked into. But it's the case, isn't it, that Parliament has a commissioner for standards. She's looked into you as well. So can I ask you just very simply, do you have confidence in her, yes or no? And it's a simple question, because if you don't say yes and you say, well, this has to be looked into, people will think you don't like her in that job.
Well, thank you, Damien. And look, just quickly get the first, or the last question out of the way first. The answer is yes, and I think the Commissioner has a extremely difficult job to do and a huge amount of work to do, and she needs to get on and be allowed to do it. Now, on the whether the system is capable of improvement or not is a matter for the Standards Committee and for the House. But look, I mean, on your main point, this summit, COP26, was never going to be able to halt climate change, as you rightly say. We were never going to be able to stop it now in its tracks at Glasgow. That was never on the cards. But what people thought we could conceivably do was slow the rate of increase and equip ourselves with the tools to turn it around. And the reason I'm so optimistic is that I think for the first time humanity is genuinely equipping ourselves with the equipment we need to halt anthropogenic climate change altogether. And so when you look at some of the things we're doing on coal, cars, cash and trees, you can see the individual commitments that we're making. I think the Alok will speak about coal, but it's an immense thing, and about everything, but it's an immense thing to get a commitment from 190 countries to phase down or phase out coal. I don't know whether the language is phase down or phase out. It doesn't seem to me, as a speaker of English, to make that much difference. The direction of travel is pretty much the same. And that's never been said before. On trees, you saw this enormous commitment to protect the forests of the world, to halt and reverse the loss of forests by 2030. And on cars, even on cars, which was actually very difficult, we got a third of the world's car market, from a standing start, because it had never been discussed before, to agree to go to electric vehicles by 2035. And every country made substantial commitments, substantial granular commitments to reduce carbon emissions. So, no, we haven't fixed it, but we have the tools. And the final thing that we I think, got right at COP26 was an idea that everybody basically gravitated around and towards. And that is using development aid, state money, our overseas budgets, the multilateral development banks' investments, using that to trigger private sector investment, and using that to drive the big decarbonisation programs in the countries that find it hard. And that, I think, was the big intellectual breakthrough at this COP. That was the real change. So things like the program led by Cyril Ramaphosa in South Africa to decarbonise their power system, that's something we haven't seen before. And that offers real hope. Now, all of this is totally contingent on governments sticking to their pledges. But I feel something very strongly. I think that a tipping point has been reached in people's attitudes. And those leaders, 122 leaders, more than had ever come to any political event in this country before, those leaders are being galvanized and propelled by their electorates and the social power of people demanding change. And I think actually in a very short space of time, it's going to be unacceptable to start a new coal-fired power station around the world, and just in a matter of a few years, because of the global political and social pressure, and you can see the way societies are able to effect that kind of change. So I fully accept, I really fully and humbly accept that this is not the full solution. Never could have been, but I think that Alok and his team, the whole UN negotiating team, have delivered just about as much as we could have hoped. And on getting language about coal into the conclusions, into the cover decision at all, was I think highly significant, a great achievement. But Alok.
Great, thank you, Prime Minister. Well, I think the first thing I'd echo is that I do think this is actually a historic achievement, and we set out by saying we wanted to keep 1.5 within reach. There were lots of people who doubted that, but we did do that, and it's not just the UK government saying that. You heard that from the floor, from climate vulnerable countries. You've heard that from climate NGOs as well. So I do think this is historic. I think you raised this issue about how do we ensure that people keep to their commitments. Well, we agreed the Paris rule book, and I know it's something that is sort of fairly opaque for most people, but the reality is that it underpins the checks and balances on whether or not countries are going to be able to deliver on their commitments and whether they are indeed delivering their commitments. So for the first time ever, we will be able to see that when a country makes a commitment and they report on what has happened in their economy, whether or not they have stuck to those. And in terms of first, so the Prime Minister, of course, made the point that coal for the very first time has ended up in one of these agreements. I mean, I remember when I first raised this months ago, people told me this is never going to happen. You will never get coal in the language. We have got coal in the language. And I think the other thing that we have managed to do is, again, it's a first. We have got a commitment from every country to come back next year to look at their 2030 emission reduction targets. And we have got them to agree that they will look at those to keep the Paris temperature goals within reach. That's historic. We've also got an agreement that every year ministers will come together to look at this issue to see whether we are matching the commitments that we've made. And we've also got agreement that for the first time ever, every year, there will be a report which sets out how countries are going forward with the commitments that they've made. I mean, I think those are all historic firsts. In terms of the issue of coal, I mean, you asked me about my being emotional. Well, look, I mean, you know, for months people have been asking me, some few good people have been asking me, do you feel the weight of the world on your shoulders? And I can tell you there was one really tense hour where I did feel the weight of the world on my shoulders. And, you know, so many people have done so much over 2 years, the UK team internationally, and yeah, this deal was absolutely in jeopardy. It really was in jeopardy. We got it over the line, and the reason we were able to do this is because of the trust that we have built around the world. The reason I said sorry, by the way, at the event was not because I thought that we didn't have a historic achievement. It's because at the end, people felt the process was opaque. And we spent 2 years being totally transparent, totally inclusive. But what I was able to do was to take the text that was being put forward by those two countries, socialize it before taking it for a formal agreement, socialize it with all the groups. And the reason we got this over the line is because people trusted the UK. They trusted that we were going to try and do something just to get this deal done. And I also want to make the point that if we had not managed to get this deal done, we would have ensured that all of those developing countries who need support, those countries in the front line of climate change, would not have got the support. Yeah. Right, they're getting more funding to adapt to the changing climate. We're ensuring that we're talking for the first time about issues like loss and damage, which really matter to them. None of this would have been possible if that deal had been lost. And I can tell you there was that 1 hour where I really felt that there was a chance that we were not going to get this deal over the line.
Thanks very much, Alok. Romilly Weeks, ITV.
Prime Minister, before COP, you described the world as being at 1 minute to midnight. Where would you characterise us as being now? And Mr. Sharma, John Kerry told ITV News that he felt let down by the watering down of the language on coal. Do you think China and India have let down the world's most climate vulnerable countries?
Romilly, I think it's still very, very difficult. It's still a massive challenge for humanity. As I've told you before, Romilly, I think that the fatal mistake now coming out of COP26, which has unquestionably been a success, the fatal mistake now would be to think that we've in any way cracked this thing. You know, nothing could be more damaging to our attempts to defeat climate change, disastrous climate change, than suddenly to bathe ourselves in a warm glow of self-satisfaction and think that well, that's climate change done. You know, let's on to the next thing. We're going to have to keep going. We're going to have to keep the countries that have made those commitments to their promises, and then before 2030 and before 2025, we're going to have to extract some more. What we've done is keep alive that ambition of restricting the growth in the temperatures of the planet. But if you ask me, am I more optimistic now? Yes, I'm much more optimistic, because I genuinely think this thing is now propelled by a force that is bigger than corporations and is bigger than governments, and that is people and consumer choice and what citizens want around the world, and that fundamentally is going to make the difference. Sorry, Alok.
Yes, and I think on this point about the change of language on coal, I think the first thing I would say, once again, is that actually this is the first time we have got language on coal in these sort of agreements. That really is historic. And yes, the phrase is now phase down rather than phase out, but that means that countries collectively have to reduce their use of coal. In terms of the reaction of developing nations, I think you heard that actually from the floor. And Tina Steeg, for instance, who represents the Marshall Islands, talked about the fact that she was, bitterly hurt as a result of that change. I mean, these are countries on the front line of climate change. For them, 1.5 is really very bad news. 2 degrees is a death sentence. So of course it matters to them, and there was lots of emotion there. And in terms of China and India, they will, on this particular issue, have to explain themselves to the developing countries.
Yeah. By the way, one thing I would say is that it wasn't just the negotiators. I think the stars of the of the COP for me were so often those vulnerable island states and others who made such incredibly powerful arguments and were very, very hard to ignore. Beth, Rigby, Sky News.
Thank you. Prime Minister, you billed this COP in September at UNGA as a turning point for humanity. You said it was 1 minute to midnight to prevent climate catastrophe, and you said that we needed to act now. But instead, and I'm going to quote the UN Secretary General, he said that the current plans for countries' plans to reduce emissions will still increase emissions this decade on a pathway that will clearly lead to temperatures rising well above 2 degrees by the end of the century. So I put it to you, isn't it a disservice to the climate catastrophe that we're facing to pretend anything but this COP summit fell short of what you wanted to achieve? And what you've actually done is press pause and kick the can down the road till next year. And Alok Sharma, to you, do you agree with the Prime Minister that phase out and phase down means the same thing? Because wasn't that the issue, that actually that language is very different, and that is the controversy around it last night that upset you so much? And then just, if I may, Prime Minister, the Chancellor said last week that your government needs to do better when it comes to standards. Do you agree with him, and do you think you made a mistake over Owen Paterson that you now regret? Thank you.
Yeah, okay, thanks, Beth. On, I don't think Antonio would want people to think, Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General of the UN, that we've cracked it here at COP in Edinburgh. Of course not, and I totally agree with him about that. And yes, you're right that we're still on a trajectory to increase the temperature of our planet by around 2 degrees, as I said at the beginning, or that's what it looks like. But what we have is the hope, and I don't think anybody would dispute this. We have the hope that we can use all the tools that we've now equipped ourselves with to keep it at 1.5 and to keep 1.5 alive. And I think that was so what we've done at COP26 is slow the growth. We couldn't stop the growth, but we've unquestionably slowed it. And I think the other thing that's so exciting and makes me optimistic is I think genuinely that by asking for countries to focus on these very specific deliverables on coal, cars, cash, and trees, and making them focus on what they're going to do to reduce CO2. We've helped to plot the way ahead, to create a roadmap for defeating climate change. And so I am optimistic, but it will. But I mean, I think, as again, optimism should not be confused with confidence. Nothing could be more fatal to this enterprise than any feeling that we've beaten it or that we've cracked it. And on your other question, all I would say is, I think it's very important that all MPs work primarily for their and above all for their constituents, and that anybody who lobbies on behalf of a commercial interest is clearly in breach of the rules. Well, I think you can take from what I've said that I think all MPs should follow the rules, and I think the rules are there to protect them, protect the public. They're very simple to understand, and we should get on with it. Natasha Clark, The Sun. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, yes, of course. Well, I mean, sorry. You phase down on the path to phasing out, and this is the first time we've actually got the coal language in. And I think it's worth reminding colleagues that actually COPs are staging posts. We've had 26 now, and each has built on the previous one. We're going to have the next one, COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt. And I think the fact that we've got the coal language in means that at future COPs, we can push further on that particular issue. You also raised this thing about sort of, I was emotional and all the rest of it. I mean, actually, there's a range of reasons for that. One is because it was just relief that we had got this deal over the line. I genuinely believe this is a historic thing that the UK government has helped to pull off. I'd had about 6 hours sleep in 3 days. The Prime Minister obviously has thanked all the key people here, but actually I also want to thank the civil society, the youth groups. They, of course, applied enormous pressure as well to ensure that we were able to get countries to make those commitments, and they will continue to play, I think, a key role as we go forward and get better commitments from countries.
And just to reinforce that, whether it's phase down or phase out, the effect is that for the first time the world has made a commitment for a downwards gradient. Let me put it that way. Whether it's out or down, it's downwards, and that's a first. And Greenpeace, I think, said the era Greenpeace. So I don't want Greenpeace now to repudiate this, but Greenpeace said as a result of COP26, the era of coal is ending, and that's a colossal thing. Natasha Clark from The Sun.
Mr Sharma, now you've sealed this deal, are you going to be eyeing up another cabinet role, looking to hold ministers' feet to the fire, or such as Secretary of State for Net Zero, perhaps? You've also said you were disappointed for the last-minute changes to the deal. Do you feel like you have failed your children and grandchildren in not pushing for more on coal? Prime Minister, do you think that you could have done more? Do you wish that you should have done more to help push that deal in Glasgow? Do you feel that you took your eye off the ball by dealing with what was going on in Westminster last week? And how would you both rate the deal out of 10? Thanks.
So I think firstly on the issue of coal, look, of course I would have preferred stronger language. That was very clear. I said that yesterday evening. However, I think the fact we managed to get language in there, and I was absolutely determined in that 1 hour that we kept the word coal in the document. I was absolutely determined to do that, and we did manage to do that. So I do think we have moved the goalposts in terms of our generation, future generations. But I think, as the Prime Minister said, there are lots of commitments that have been made. What we now need to do is to ensure that those commitments are actually delivered by governments around the world. And I think in terms of future roles and things, I mean, I'll leave that to the Prime Minister, but all I would say is that we have a presidency for a year, and there are lots of things that we have done during the past 2 years. We've set up a International Zero Emission Vehicles Council. We've set up an energy council where we are sort of supporting countries around the world with the move to clean energy. And in fact, at the COP, we were part of an announcement of $10 billion to help developing countries move to clean power. We're going to be working on that as well, and a whole range of other commitments that we got out at the COP itself. And as the PM said, we will work closely, of course, with the next COP holders, Egypt, to make sure that these commitments are delivered on.
Alok Sharma done an absolutely outstanding job, and he's got another year to run as president of COP. And we're going to give working with the UK government and, of course, the Egyptians to hold everybody's feet to the fire, as you rightly say, Natasha. And my job has really been to continue the leader level dialogue. That's what I've been doing for months and months and months, talking to colleagues around the world and getting them to make progress, as indeed a lot of them have. Not all of them as much as we would like, but a lot of them have really come through with some pretty remarkable things for their country, difficult things for their countries. And I just want to repeat what I think is the key thing about this COP. We've given ourselves the tools to fix the problem. We haven't fixed the problem, but we now have a tool. And remember what I always say about the UK. When I was a kid, 80% of our energy came from coal. When I was Mayor of London, 40% came from coal. Today, 1%. Countries around the world can see that trajectory. You talk about phase out or phase down or whatever. They can see that downwards gradient. And what we're doing now is bringing together coalitions of supportive countries, adding in the finance, leveraging in the private sector to help those countries who find it difficult to move beyond coal to decarbonise. And that's the exciting agenda that COP26 in Glasgow has lifted off. And that's what we're going to be building on. And you're talking to leaders from countries around the world, India, Indonesia, South Africa. They can all see how this model could be relevant to their progress and their ambition. So that's the reason I'm most optimistic. Out of 10. For what? For achievement? The deal. It's Alok, where are you? Where are you?
I don't do this sort of numbers.
No, I know. I think my last number was a 6 out of 10 chance of success. I said. I think it's over. The outcome is over 6 out of 10. How about that? I won't say more than that. It's over 6 out of 10. Do you want to add to that, Alok?
Well, I was just going to say, actually, I mean, what you really need to do is to listen to what, for instance, groups like the least developed countries are saying. I mean, they have said that this has really moved things forward in terms of climate action. They've thanked the UK for the leadership that we have shown. And, in fact, in our presidency year, this is an opportunity to continue this. Quite a lot of time, we talk about global Britain. I mean, this, as far as I'm concerned, is global Britain in action. We are leading in the world, both domestically, and I say that because countries around the world recognise that we are leading domestically, but this is our chance to continue leading internationally as well.
Brilliant, thank you. Steve Swinford, The Times.
Prime Minister, you do have one significant lever at your disposal with India in the form of a future trade deal. Would you make more stringent climate change targets part of such a trade deal, or phasing out of coal as part of that? Mr Sharma, can I ask how you got here today in time for this press conference? Did you take the train or did you take the plane? And do you think it's incumbent on all of us to fly less? And then lastly, Prime Minister, you told your Cabinet this week that you saw the handling of the Owen Paterson affair as an unforced error. Why are you so unwilling to say that publicly? And do you, as some allies say, see apologising as a form of weakness?
First of all, on India and our relations with India, we've got a great relationship with India, and I don't think there's any particular need to introduce this into the discussion about our bilateral relations, because I think Narendra Modi can see the advantages for India in going down the track that he's now on. Now, don't forget, India made a pretty impressive, in spite of what happened at the last minute about phase down, phase out. India came up with some really impressive stuff on decarbonising their power sector, decarbonising their economy by 2030. And the actual commitments, the solid commitments that India made are real, and we've got to make sure that they're delivered. But look at what Narendra Modi, Prime Minister Modi, is actually producing on his One Sun, One Grid, One World initiative. It's pretty incredible solar power program. India is obviously blessed in that respect, and I think they're going to make a lot more progress. The UK, as I said, what the UK wants to do, we have the technology, we have the access to the technology, we have the fantastic expertise in finance. We want to help and be part of the coalitions that are trying to take countries forward. And on your point about what may or may not have been said in some cabinet away day, your sources are normally worryingly good, but I will say no more than that, if that's all right, Steve.
Thanks, Prime Minister. So I think firstly, in terms of India, I want to echo that, because India is committed to actually really quite ambitious 2030 emission reduction targets, and they've said that 50% of their power sector will be from renewables by 2030. I mean, that is really very, very big, and I think we should commend them for that. I've spent quite a lot of time talking to R.K. Singh, the Power Minister, and the UK government is working with India through Mission Innovation 2 and other initiatives as well. So I think that's important to recognise. In terms of how I got here, yes, I got here by train and then by an electric vehicle, courtesy of the government car service.
And just showing off.
And I think you raised this issue about air travel. Look, I mean, on a personal level, I think that it is about personal choice. But what you need to do is obviously to incentivise people. I've always believed in carrot rather than stick. But the government is investing in developing sustainable aviation fuels. We've got the Jet Zero programme that's up and running between the Transport Department and the Business Department. So there is a lot that we are doing and we will continue to do. And you know, technology goes really very, very fast. You know, only a few years ago, we had very little offshore wind, and you know, the Prime Minister has been very much pushing this agenda. We've now got the biggest offshore wind sector in the world, and in the Prime Minister's 10-point plan for a green industrial revolution, we're going to quadruple that by 2030. I mean, I personally think we could go even further because there is appetite within the sector.
Thanks very much. I'm sorry, when I say you're showing off by going in an EV, ultimately we want all government cars to be EVs. There seems to be some technical problem at the moment with the armour plating, so we're working on that. Jason Groves, the Mail.
Thanks very much. We had a poll yesterday showing 2/3 of voters want you to apologise over sleaze. I sense you're a little bit reluctant to do that. What would you say to those people who think that you've got it wrong? On the climate issue, Mr. Sharma here, I think, has gone vegetarian. What are you personally going to do? Are you still driving that clapped-out old diesel of yours? And finally, how's the Queen? Have you spoken to her?
Yeah, Jason. This is a press conference that I think I've said quite a lot about. Parliamentary stuff already. Of course, you know, I think that things could certainly have been handled better. Let me put it that way, by me. But on my own personal contribution to reducing CO2, I don't think I used to go everywhere by bike, which you know, that was a pretty massive thing. Massive thing to do, and well, I don't know if it was massive, but it was certainly made some small contribution. And as for your question about Her Majesty, I just want to say that I know that everybody will be wanting to offer their best wishes to Her Majesty the Queen, and I just want to reassure everybody by saying that I did see the Queen for an audience last week. On Wednesday in Windsor, and she's very well. So I just, you know, it shouldn't need saying, but I just wanted to say it anyway. Okay, everybody. I think that's. I'm so sorry. Thank you all very much. Thank you.